My intuition led to my parents' separation and saved my mum's life. Intuition is very important in our day-to-day decisions. Have you ever felt the urge to just do something, but a part of you doesn't want to, but there is a gut feeling telling you to? Can you relate? I would often put my intuition down to luck until, well, let's rewind back 7 years earlier when I was only 16 years old. I went to see a musical with my dad. I was definitely more of a daddy's girl. Midway through the play, I didn't know why, but I had a really strong urge to leave. The evening was going so well and I didn't want to be the one to spoil it. But the urge just kept getting stronger and it started to scare me. I was actually beginning to think something bad was going to happen. So I had to fake an illness. That way Dad had no choice but to take me home. On the way home, I was so twitchy in the car. It's like he wasn't even driving fast enough for me. When we got home, my dad went upstairs and I went to the toilet. Next thing I heard was a loud argument coming from my parents' room. It was scary. I have never heard my father shout like that before. I mean, my parents had had disagreements in the past. It's usually quieter with a swift resolution. I thought, that's strange. But at the same time, my gut feeling was telling me to go and see what was happening. So I went with the feeling. What I saw when I entered my parents' room was devastating. A naked guy was just standing there. Daddy reached into the closet for his shotgun and slid 2 cartridges. I was thinking, one for Mummy and one for her naked friend. I shouted, "Daddy, no!" He looked at me and burst into tears and just walked away. Still holding the shotgun, he went down the stairs and I followed him. He jumped into the car and started to drive away. There wasn't any telling what he was thinking. In a split second, without thinking, I hopped into the moving car. I have never seen my dad drive like that before. The way he was driving that night, let's just say I am lucky to be alive today. After about an hour's drive, we finally came to a stop in the middle of a field. I looked across at Dad. He looked at me. I didn't bother to ask if he was okay. It was clear that he wasn't. I mean, if you walked in to find a naked person with your partner in your home, would you be okay? We sat there right through the night. I saw Dad pick up the shotgun. I didn't know what to do or say. Out of nowhere, I just uttered, "I love you, Dad." He broke down and started crying again. I hugged him. Then I slowly took the shotgun and placed it in the back of the car. My dad must have had 100 missed calls from Mum that night, not to mention texts. I too had missed calls, voicemails and texts from Mum. The next day we went back to the house. I saw my dad packing his stuff into the car. Mum was trying to talk to him, but Dad did not utter a word. I decided that I'm gonna go with him. To make a very long story short, the next 2 years I saw my dad waste away. He took it real bad. He became an alcoholic, a drug addict. He was depressed. He refused to see a doctor, and he wouldn't even cut his beard or wash. I guess that was his way of dealing with the pain. He still hadn't spoken a word to my mum since. I met up with her a few times, but the mother-daughter relationship between us, it wasn't the same. I can't get that image out of my head. Every time I ask her why she cheated on my father, she changes the subject. Things took a dramatic turn. My dad died from an overdose, and it was like my whole world turned upside down. Until this day, I blame myself for following that gut feeling. At the funeral, I called my mother some names that I will dare not to repeat. I am so ashamed of the way that I reacted towards her. But in my eyes, she was partly to blame for his death, for his sufferation, the addiction. He died depressed and with a broken heart. He didn't even have any closure. They'd been together since high school. She still hasn't given me an explanation, and I'm struggling to come to terms with that night. We were very happy before all of that drama. I wish I never acted upon my feelings. It's been 5 years since Daddy's passing, and I haven't spoken to my mother since, Until I was out with some friends around 7:30 in the evening having a dinner. Suddenly, I had a strange feeling that I wanted to visit my mother. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't shake that feeling. I mean, over the years, I had thought about going to see her, but this time, this feeling, it was different. I've had a strong intuition all of my life, and I've always followed that feeling in my gut. My mind was telling me to stay and enjoy the evening and, just pop by tomorrow. Plus, I was thinking, why would she even talk to me after the way I spoke to her 5 years ago at the funeral? But everything in my gut was telling me to go. Even my heart was palpitating. I decided to go with the feeling. When I got to the front door, I had a horrible feeling in my stomach. As I knocked on the door, luckily I remembered I still had my keys. When I entered, I was blinded by smoke, and it was coming from the living room. I called out for my mother, but I heard no answer. The smoke was too much, so I opened all of the windows and I shouted for help, and the neighbors heard and came quickly. I then used my scarf to cover my nose and I ran upstairs. Even though the smoke was burning my eyes, my will to find my mother drove me on. My mum was asleep in her room with the door closed. I was afraid that she'd passed out from the smoke. I woke her up immediately. I was relieved to know that she was still alive. Luckily, I came just in time. Apart from being scared and, surprised to see me, she was fine. The fire was downstairs and the upstairs was engulfed in thick smoke, which was very dangerous because a person can suffocate in it. I closed my eyes and used my memory of the house to navigate my way out with my mother, quickly down the stairs and straight outside of in 2 to 3 minutes. But it felt like forever. We embraced each other so tightly. I felt all of the years of tension just lifting. We were both in tears. I apologized for my outburst at Dad's funeral, and she apologized for what happened with her naked friend. And for Dad's death, those simple words gave me a sense of closure. We could both move on from everything that had happened. The neighbors managed to partially put out the fire before it could spread out of control. A fire brigade arrived a few minutes later. Mum explained to them that she was smoking a cigarette and drinking a glass of wine at the side table. She was feeling a bit tired, so she put out the cigarette in the ashtray and emptied it into the bin, then went upstairs. It must have accidentally caught alight, and because she didn't have a smoke detector installed and her room door was shut, she wasn't aware of the fire. Everything was burnt in the living room. I'm so glad I decided to put my pride aside, and I followed my gut feeling to go to my mother's house that night. If I hadn't, I would have spent the rest of my life regretting it. Looking back, no one is perfect. Everything happens for a reason, and life is way too short to hold grudges. Can you relate? Please like and subscribe to this channel. It's free to subscribe.